Okay, so welcome everyone. We are here again online. Not able to do that in SAP office as usual, and then we are not going to have beers and pizzas, and we're not going to have the best part of the event, which is the happy hour afterwards. But yeah, we can still have some drinks while people are presenting or after, up to you guys. Just we are not going to be able to go to the pub. That's a shame. Then today what we're going to have is three guys presenting three different topics. I think it's going to be the very first time that we're going to talk about DevOps, and the first time that we're going to have Signavio for sure, and probably the first time that we are going to talk about test automation in general in SAP in our, at least in our chapter here. So this is going to be very interesting, especially for myself, because I'm very keen and I like this subject very much. So Pedro is going to start talking about DevOps. Then I think for everyone, 30 to 40 minutes should be all right. Then we have some questions at the end. If we have too many questions, then that's all right. We can keep that going. I don't want to put some hard limits on time for the presenters and also for the questions. So if the chat is good and people have a lot of questions, we can keep that going. Then after Pedro, we are going to have Thiago talking about BPI and Signavio. So this is interesting, startups. So SAP is buying a lot of startups, and this hot topic at the moment as well. And then last but not least, we're going to have Mark talking about the test automation in SAP. And that's it, guys. So from my side, this is it. I'm going to host you tonight, and I'm just going to talk you through all the presentations. So I'm not going to do anything else rather than just introducing people. So they can introduce themselves by now and start presenting. So I think, Pedro, up to you.
Yep. Cool. Thanks. Let me share my screen first of all. So, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for the invitation, Mauricio. I see some familiar names here that I met in different places and different occasions. So, and some of them I just follow on Twitter or LinkedIn. So it's very good to get together with all of you. Thank you very much. For those who don't know me, my name is Pedro Souza. I'm originally from Brazil. I'm based now in Auckland, New Zealand. I migrated around 3 years ago, or almost 4 years ago. In Brazil, I worked at SAP as development architect for an LOB called Innovative Business Solutions, who used to do custom development for SAP. Then I worked at DXC here in Auckland. I was working at TTC. On the event card. It says that I'm still at DXC, but actually I left last week, and this Monday, I just started back at SAP as engagement executive for platform and technology. Most of all, will be actually looking for the adoption of BTP here in New Zealand. The presentation today is that I'm gonna deliver to you is actually a replay of a webinar that I had when I was still at TTC. I will share these links later on, so you can also have a replay. So actually, Mauricio, I think he watched this one, asked me to bring the content in here. I mean, there was a webinar at some point in March that we delivered together with Tricentis, which is TTC's partner. And it's the factory that has Tricentis Tosca, the test automation tool that SAP is actually indicating as the best tool for the purpose of testing automation. And following this webinar in March, I recorded this demo where the development flow that we suggest on the webinar was actually put in practice on this demo. The idea today is to me to present this demo to you, but I will apologize in upfront because as I left the company on Friday, I lost access to most of my demo environments. And now that I start in a new place, I still didn't have time to set everything up. So it will be a very short version of the demo, but I will talk you through the content in the slides, and I think it will be quite interesting for all of you. So the presentation actually talks about agile software engineering, or ASE in short, and how. And I mean, the idea is not to say this is the right way to do things, but it's just a way that I kind of put together when I was still working at DXC. We put this in some of the proposals here in New Zealand for some of the customers. And while I was at TTC, I brought this idea with me, and we tried to put together what would be like a development flow, more targeting to customers who are working on the classic or in a more traditional ABAP environment. And that will be hopefully, now that I'm working with BTP, that will be hopefully migrating to a cloud environment. So how we can actually help these customers to start to experiment a DevOps CI/CD kind of flow on their developments, on their deliverables, looking forward to a new model of working. And we do that, or we propose the customers to engage on that via the usage on agile software engineering, applying techniques such as test-driven development and clean code, as well as the usage of test automation. And in this case, using Tricentis Suite, which while I was at TTC was the toolings that we were implementing in some of the customers here in New Zealand and also in the US. So let's get into it, and just some of the topics that we'll be talking about. So agile software engineering, agility with quality, so a little bit of enterprise DevOps for SAP, or at least what would be a vision of that. We know that DevOps is quite broad, and really depending on your landscape, the level of maturity of your development and your operations teams, there are different flavors to do it. So it's just kind of what would be one of these flavors from the perspective that we came up with. And of course, the demo that in our circumstances here will be quite short. Okay, so agility and quality, why do they matter, and how we bring these things together? So we used to be in a very siloed environment, especially if you think on the more traditional SAP landscape. Development, quality, production, very separated. You have the developers working on their box, moving across to QA, for the functional consultants to test, or even for the developers to perform the test, and big bang testing phase, a lot of efforts put into that, transports going back and forth, and that's not necessarily agile and not necessarily aiming the quality, especially because your responsive time is very it's very big usually. So how we bring this together, and we bring this together via DevOps, or we try to bring this together, we try to put this very siloed environment in a fluent and responsive environment, increasing collaboration, reducing the cycle time on delivering your enhancements, and delivering new functionality, and delivering features or even fix. And again, more collaboration and real-time feedback from the end users or your functional consultants, so producing a fluid response across the whole development or the product or the project lifecycle. And what's the problem, or what's how we tackle, let's say, the quality problem? Well, for quality, usually we think about quality is usually quite of a boring topic, and we as delivery teams they do not pay too much attention to that, or we tend to not, because we are pressured on time in terms of timing, in terms of projects that need to go live, deadlines, and etc. And happens that we produce code that is not necessarily in a good quality, and that leads us to have an increasing of the cost across the time we have a project, or across the time we have a product that we need to maintain. So it's known that the development productivity when a project starts, for example, tends to go up, but along the time it tends to go down because of the number of fixes that you need to do. And the more and more fixes that you need to deliver, if you don't have a robust and a proper quality environment or a quality assurance environment that produce fluid responsive or your the response of the fixes or features that you deliver are too long, you tend to accumulate or to create technical debt along your development, and then your productivity goes down. And in the worst case scenarios, you even need to rewrite the whole thing or some portion of it if a product really, or code really goes really bad in terms of quality. And technical debt is usually a huge problem, especially when you have siloed environments where testing is segregated from development. Technical debt along the time tends to consume the productivity of development team, and also demand the time that you could be working on top of new features or new enhancements of your project or your product. You need to put developers or need to put team effort in fixing things that could be analyzed and addressed in an early stage. So in order to go after these problems and addressing these challenges, the suggestion or what we understand, we at TTC at the time, understand that could be a number of practices that could be put in practice is the usage of agile software engineering. So agile software engineering is actually, it's built on top of Scrum and focus on the technical development practices to make Scrum and agile methodologies to work. So it's very often, and it's not too uncommon to go into projects or go into development teams that say that they are doing agile in terms of project management. But when you look into the practice of development, they are not necessarily agile. And especially on the SAP environment, or on the classic SAP environment or ABAP environment, this is quite often a challenge because the change or how often you can deliver or deploy a code from development to QA is not so fast as it need or as it could be or it's demand to be. So agile software engineer was actually idealized by Uncle Bob, which is a guy called Robert C. Martin, one of the authors of Agile Manifesto. And it goes after a profound change on the development methods, bringing significant impact in deliveries, aiming the quality. It was adopted by SAP as the way internal developments or internal development teams must build software. So I personally has experienced this, the adoption of those around 2014 or 2015 when I was working on SAP custom development. We had a number of trainings in some of the practice and the techniques that you see on this puzzle. And as long as I know, as far as I know, so a good portion of the development teams are actually looking after some of these techniques in order to produce the softwares and the products that we know. On today's presentation, the idea is to talk about three of them, which is test-driven development, clean code, and automated testing. So test-driven development, and there is this quote, why write more code, which is a quote that were not rare the occasions when I talked about this in the teams that I was part of, that I was asked about it. Okay, why should we write more lines of code in order to produce the same results? Or, for example, are we charging the customers more for our because we are writing more stuff? It's not necessarily accurate. So there is a study that was in order to prove why to write more code or why we should be writing more lines of code to produce software. There is this study that was conducted in 2008. It was an experiment, a joint experiment between IBM and Microsoft, where they had 4 development teams that were designated to use TDD, and another 4 that were designated to not use test-driven development. And they were conducting projects that were on the same size, on the same velocity. So they're pretty similar teams. And the experiment was conducted into live projects. So they actually had real results, not on POCs or internal projects, hackathons, or this kind of stuff. Actually, there were live projects that we were working on. I will be sharing later on this slide deck. The references are below, so you can actually look into the proper paper later on if you need it. From these studies, what were the findings? So the test-driven development teams, they spent indeed 15 to 33% more time writing code than the teams that were not using test-driven developments. However, these teams that were executing test-driven development, they experimented between 40 to 90% fewer defects from the non-TDD team. So these teams, they had 40 to 90% more effectiveness and, let's say, more quality, let's say, on the product that they were delivering. They had more time available to work on other things rather than fixing defects or fixing bugs. They also, these teams that were executing with test-driven development, they also gave the feedback by the end of the study that they had a better understanding of the business requirements. So when you are actually writing a test, when you are writing your local test class, for example, in ABAP, it actually helps you to think or to understand better what's the requirement you want to fulfill with the code or with the solution that you are writing. This helped along the process for the development teams to actually produce feedback, to produce insights to the architecture or to the functional teams where they could contribute to the bigger picture of the project, rather than just picking up a user story or a piece of a specification for you to create the code. And by the end of the experiment, what actually happened is that the teams that experimented the test-driven development opted to continue to use it along the way and across other projects that they had to deal with. And about clean code and why we should care about this, I really like this. This is from an article from a developer that actually I really like to follow. I think her name is Elena. Let me just open really quick. And yeah, I see that code. It's a quite good article. I really recommend you guys to take a look on that if you didn't. But actually, she compared on the article this very old piece of logic from I'm very sure that if you work with ABAP and if you had to maintain anything, or even if you had debugged some standard code in the past, you actually saw something like that. So it's a lot of stuff that is embedded in the code that doesn't have any usage anymore, doesn't have any relevance, or is outdated. And the comparison that she made with a sheet, I think it's here, or a garage, or a shelf in there with stuff that you just throw away in your garage for a long time is actually perfect, right? So and along the way on her article, she mentions these other articles about spark of joy and the importance of keeping things tidy. So when you are actually tidying up something at your place, in your home, in your garage, in your closet, in your wardrobe, whatever it is, when you finish that, it's quite of a satisfying feeling that you have. And the same happens with your code. The same happens with the products that we work on a daily basis. So if you apply or if you care about the code that you are dealing with, it actually sparks the joy in the development or in the developer or in the development team and makes the work enjoyable, along other things. So clean code, let me just jump to another one. Clean code actually aims the sustainable development. And sustainable development is nothing than meet the customer expectations, reduce the technical debt. Here, just referring what we said in the beginning. So reducing the technical debt, we are actually making our teams more efficient and being able to make better usage of their time rather than just fixing stuff that are accumulated along the time. And reduce, I think this is interesting for all of us who works with development, reduce the development pain. So pass over code from someone to someone else, give maintenance or some colleagues piece of logic, or even onboard someone on a new hire on your project or in your company or in your team. It's a real pain if you have a messy piece of code, if you have something that you don't enjoy looking at, or if you open your Eclipse, VS Code, whatever it is, you look at that piece of crap and you say, Jesus Christ, I need to deal with this. If you make the adjustments and if you keep it sustainable and if you keep that organized and tidy, it's actually really, really pleasant to work with. And that's, I mean, the code that we produce actually our daily tool is where we spend most of our time during our work. So keep it tidy. It's quite important. It shouldn't be something that we only care about when we need to rewrite or something like that. And some facts on clean codes, and this is some from some articles and studies as well that I could find. So writing code that is readable actually optimizes your time. So if we think that we are writing code that is better, which is better tested using test-driven development, for example, we are producing already, we are producing less defects. We are wasting less time on bug fixes. If we have a code that is readable by anyone, we are again optimizing our time and we are freeing up our capacity for something else, doing innovation, learning, or whatever we want. There is also some other figures that say that developers spend roughly 30% of their time creating the code, but rather they are expending also roughly 70% maintaining the code, giving maintenance stuff, changing, adjusting, addressing defects, adjusting the code from your unit tests. So keeping it tidy and easy to read actually really makes your make your time more productive, make your responsive or make the deliverable of your feature fixes or whatever faster, and that actually increase the responsive time or the deliverable. Your deliverables become faster to the market, to our end users, and it's actually creating more fluidness in the process. And you will receive the feedback from the testers or from your end user acceptance earlier. Now referring back to what we said in the beginning, what we want to have is the earlier, the better for the feedbacks. In clean code at SAP, so there is quite a lot happening in the last 2 to 3 years, I would say. So in around 2019, there is this Clean ABAP initiative that was launched, which is an adoption of the book or the guide from Uncle Bob, the Clean Code book. It was adapted for ABAP, so there is a style guideline available on GitHub. This was in 2019. In 2020, I think it was January, ABAP Code Pal was launched, which is a set of checks that you can put on your ATC. So all the things that you have on the guideline, you can actually enforce the checks on your code via ATC or SCI. So it's free. You can just go. It's an open project as well. You can contribute to that. You can just download and put in your development space. And 2021, we had the ABAP Code Review Guideline. So it's a practical guide for SAP development best practices, and it also touches topics such as CI/CD and DevOps. So now talking about enterprise DevOps, or what would be a vision of that for SAP. So usually a project or a BAU or product has basically 3 streams, right? So we have the work management. You could be looking at prototyping tools, a service desk ticketing, something for your time booking, A project management tool, for example, Jira, Trello, or even Rike. You have something for your documentation, like MS Teams or Confluence. You can have a layer or cannot have a layer of for software in distribution. You can have a continuous delivery tool. In this case, we are mentioning specifically two, like such as Active Control or RevTrack for your transport management connected to Solution Manager. You may or may not have connection to a Git server, so you could be looking at or using something like ABAP Git or GCTS. And on the CI/CD automation layer, you are pretty much looking for something like an automation server, such as Jenkins or GitLab, or Bamboo, for instance, a Git repository, GitHub, GitLab, or even Bitbucket, and a test acceleration. In this case, I'm mentioning Tricentis suite. So this is pretty much the layers that we observe, or we observed at TTC. What does they look like usually in a development landscape or in development space? And today's presentation is aiming these two: the software distribution in CI/CD, and on the demo, more specifically, this frame here, where we have the development flow. Actually, it's concentrated in these three components on the left-hand side. Well, to enable that, just talk a little bit about ABAP Git-based development, or Git-based development for ABAP. And here we have what's certainly a picture of our traditional or well-known development landscape for SAP. So you might have a BAU environment with your dev, QA, or production. If you have a project or a transformation going on, you probably have another layer of development in QA. And here it's the kind of the same environment, but instead of having the different tracks, we are actually connecting our development space to a Git server using ABAP Git, or if you are looking on the latest version of S/4HANA, for example, you can be using GCTS. So the idea is to decentralize the code version control from your development stack, or your NetWeaver development stack, and getting this exposed to GitHub. Doing that, you are actually gaining a lot more than just getting an enhanced version control or a branch feature capability. You're actually exposing, since we have ABAP Git, this is actually the first time that we start to expose our code base from an ABAP stack to external tools. For example, the building tools such as Jenkins or GitLab CI, for example. This enables a lot in terms of change management as well, because you don't only rely on the transportation to QA to trigger your tests or to automate some of the steps on your development lifecycle, such as we are going to take a look on that later. And how do we enable CI/CD on the ABAP space? It's basically via automation. So if we look on the dev side of DevOps, on code build, plan, and test, here we are going to present some of the tools that we can be looking at in order to foster this automation, and you can get started on the automation on your ABAP space. So on the plan side, we are looking for the work management layer. So as again, Jira, Rike, or ServiceNow, if you're looking on more on a maintenance program, for example. On the code side, we are looking for tools such as Eclipse, VS Code, and the usage of the ABAP unit framework to enable the test-driven development. And of course, the enablement of Git servers or via ABAP Git or GCTS. On your build, we are looking for the most known tools for build and CI, such as Jenkins, GitLab CI, and Bamboo. And here I'm actually adding another one, which is specific for Tricentis, which is a qTest, which is more like test management tool. And on the test side, we are looking for automated testing, leveraging the using of Tricentis Tosca or Selenium if you're looking after an open source option. Well, the development flow that we would be looking at the demo, it's something like this, and I will share later on the link to the demo that I recorded in the past, so that unfortunately I cannot go through the whole picture. But basically, if we bring that that breakdown of activities from work management, CI/CD, and an SAP landscape, the sequence of actions that we had on the demo, it's something that start on the work management side of the house. So when you pick up a user story, for example, if you're a developer, you pick up a user story from your sprint board to start the development. You create a new branch of GitHub for that particular feature that you are delivering. Then a new transport request is created. You perform the code or fulfill your requirements from your user story via the usage of test-driven development. When we do the commit or we send this to GitHub, in this case, it would be using GitHub on the demo. Automated tests and code pellets are executed. So via ABAP Git, we can configure the usage of coding, some of the inspections from Code Inspector, from this SAP Standard Code Inspector. You can attach that to your commit, and if you have unit tests, those are executed, and as well as the code pel. So here we would be ensuring that the code that you are delivering to your Git server is tested in an automated way, and also our clean code checks are executed. Then we go through the regular process of code review and merge to the master branch on GitHub. And once the pull request is approved, this is something that we'll be able to show from here. It's something I will be able to show you on a mini demo, let's say. Once your pull request is approved, then you have a Jenkins pipeline being triggered and their tests executed on Tosca. And actually, this is what I would like to show to you today. The whole demo that you will be able to see on the link that I will share later on actually caters for the whole cycle. So since you pick up your user story, creating the branch, doing the code, you will be able to see the checks happening or even triggering errors. Yeah, and then when the deliverable is or the pull request is approved and merged to the master branch, then the Jenkins is triggered. And this is something that I would like to show to you now on how the automated tests get executed. So let me jump remote machine. All right, I just leave this one aside for a second. Right, so as I don't have an ABAP environment accessible at the moment, so I just left a pull request manually created here and ready to be merged. So I went through the process in theory to create some coding with test-driven development. My unit tests were executed while I committed the code to my Git server, and went through code review and etc. So now I'll just merge my pull request and I will confirm the merge. This should start my building process. So you can see that the build is going on. And this should trigger something in here. Yeah, no, not this one. So yeah. So here is so on the Tosca side, this is a Tricentis Tosca server that I have installed. It has this component called Tosca CI remote execution service. So this script, I'll just leave this for a moment because this can take a while. I'm not entirely sure how long it's gonna take. There's an infrastructure component that I can control, but just talk a little bit on this. Right, it's going through. So yeah, so this is script, what it does. It's simply at the moment, it's just simply triggering the execution of this CI remote execution service. This into Tosca, and unfortunately I cannot open the Tosca, otherwise it's gonna stuck the execution. But in Tosca, it goes into an execution folder where all my test cases, and I can show this later on, all my test cases that were created are created and lined up. And this execution folder triggered so you can have, for example, an execution list on Tosca can have listed any n number of test cases. So in this example that we have on the demo, for example, the code caters for a sales order approval process. So we are changing the layers of approvers. So we are adding a new layer of approver. So imagining a situation where we actually need to do this in a project, we could put into this execution list, for example, a test case that creates a sales order, a test case that selects an approver for a sales order, a test case that approves a sales order, and so on and so on. So the actual tasks that your functional consultant would execute regularly, let's imagine that you perform your coding on development, releases a transport to QA, and then your functional consultant spends 1 day or two executing very good old executing any tests and see if your development didn't break anything and etc. So you can just put all your tests in an execution folder, and all these tests get executed automatically. Sorry, by the Jenkins trigger that goes into the Tosca CI. It's just taking a while, and I remember it took around 3 minutes before on my latest test.
Is it because you selected?
Sorry?
Is it because you selected a character that blocked the window?
No, shouldn't. Definitely shouldn't. It was getting the license, but yeah. So on my test this afternoon, it took around 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Do you have the logs from the previous one where we could see the results?
Yes. There are 2 places that they get stored. So sorry. The first one is it's here on the qTest test management tool. So once your build is finished, it sends the information to your test management tool, so you know exactly how many test runs you had. and how they went, if they passed it or not, and you can even raise a defect to Jira, for example. In here, I think this is from another demo. Not this afternoon's. So this is a place that the results, the JUnit file gets sent to, and on Jenkins, they also get logged. So this one was the one that happened this afternoon. Yeah, this doesn't happen yet. So almost complete, right? If it get failed, you can see the logs here as well. But actually what this script does, it generates a JUnit file and sends to qTest. But I think they changed this one anyway, that I'm not using anymore, probably. Well, I probably, let me try to show Tosca a little bit. Just I don't know if this is being executed or not. Let me just open and you can see how the execution list looks like. But yeah, so as I said, so the idea is actually to show how a cycle of a code that you produce, that you try to put your unit tests in an automated way, and your tests to be executed automatically when you commit them to GitHub, and once these changes are approved or merged into the branch, then into your master branch, you have your actually functional tests being executed. There is a lot that can happen in between. So this is a very simplified model and a very simplified concept. For example, you might ask me, okay, but how a code that you are doing on development would be tested if you didn't have a transport going to QA? So this is where an enhancement of this flow would come into place. So for example, you could be looking into Project Piper, for example, to trigger your transports, or if you need to deploy an UI5 application, Tosca can also automate the tests on UI5. So there is a lot of flavors that might need to happen, and a lot of adjustments and enhancements of this idea of a flow that might need to happen, depends on the type and on the model of your application. Other things that you might be want to look into is to use ABAP, which is another open source project that you can hook on your checks, on your ATC, or even on your pull request approval. I'll probably stop here. I'll just show this one because I reckon I talked too much already. And I will, first of all, I'm really sorry that it was a little bit of a clunky presentation because I didn't know how much things I had available to present today, since I lost good portion of my access, and I really would like to see this test being executed from Jenkins, but that didn't happen. But just to really quick cover a bit of a test automation. So this is how a test case looks like on Tosca. So this is an order to cache process with all the steps, and this is an execution list. So this folder in here, this execution list, is the one that should have been triggered by our Jenkins process. So this is the builds that happened in the past. Most of them have failed. Actually, the idea was for them to fail because we want to show the actual test picking up an error, right? So, but yeah, again, sorry for if that was a little bit clunky. It was a bit challenging to put it together, but I appreciate your time. And yeah, I'll share the links that I have from the original presentation and the original demo, that you can actually see this running smoothly on the environment that was 100% available. But thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Pedro. Really nice to see this whole DevOps stuff happening for you, and see people trying to make that work in ABAP. We know that the whole concept in ABAP is everything is different, and whenever we talk about CI/CD pipelines, automation tests, and all these flows happening in different tools and different landscapes, it's very scary for all the ABAPers, and all the ABAPers, I mean ourselves. Some of us, like yourself, like Thiago, and some others, we are brave enough to try to find out and try to hack our way in the new tools. And new tools, I mean in SAP, not new for any other language, but for SAP, everything that whenever we talk about these kind of thing, it's brand new. Even SAP doesn't know exactly how these should be implemented. Even ABAP Git, it's a community-driven initiative. So we have a lot of room for improvements. We have a lot of things to change, especially inside the companies and mindsets. But I think we are a much better place today than as we were even 1 year ago, where nobody knew about this kind of thing, nobody knew about this kind of tool. So yeah, it's a shame that we couldn't see. Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't have access to the people who own it, so I can only blame myself. That's terrible. But I will share the link of the records that I mentioned. Do you reckon the best place for me to paste them is on the chat?
Yeah, you can see that afterwards. You can have a look in the chat. That there's a lot of discussions going on, a lot of people sharing ideas and some questions and doubts. So guys, if you have any question, you can speak up. Just unmute yourself and ask the questions to Pedro, and he will be happy to answer you.
Pedro, Mark Henderson here. How did TTC embed Tricentis features such as orchestrated services virtualization, or did they at all? And how does that fit into the DevOps cycle and the adoption by developers of embedding test automation for CI/CD into those earlier cycles to try and bring time frames and quality forward?
I don't know, to be honest. If they did, I didn't participate on that. I only worked for TTC for 6 months, to be honest. Okay. And I was more working on the projects here in New Zealand, and we didn't use this functionality, so I can't just talk against them.
Okay,
but I'm pretty sure that Tricentis must have. Then. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Tricentis for sure they have a use case of that via TTC, not that I am aware.
Okay, now I did that on a project, not a SAP project, but a project at Queensland Health, where initially and for those guys who don't know what orchestrated services virtualization is, it's the creation of stubs and harnesses, so you don't have to wait on environments. You can simulate interfaces and the like, and to me it's collapsing that unit test, system test boundary, and seeing developers now stepping into spaces where typically testers would have been, or functional consultants would have been involved years ago. And it's really interesting to see that role changing. But initially the development and the architects were really reticent to take on those changes, but once they realised what it would do for them, things like that. And they weren't a DevOps shop at all. It's Queensland Health, right? They were so risk averse you couldn't fire the gun in the air and hit anything because they were all ducking for cover. So it was just interesting. I'm just interested if you had any experience with that.
No, fortunately not. Sounds really nice. It would be I would be very happy to see that happening on an SAP landscape, but it would be tricky. But no, unfortunately, I haven't experienced it, so sorry.
Okay, thanks so much.
I have one question that somebody has asked in the chat, so I'm not going to scroll through because it's a lot of things in there happening. So it seems to be a concern from people, from ABAPers in general, whenever we talk about this model using Git. ABAP lock. So how we deal with ABAP lock. So everything is going to be in your ABAP dev system. Everybody's going to share the same TR. All the objects are going to be locked in a TR. So how we can have feature branch or multiple branches in our Git.
Yeah, I personally, I don't see a silver bullet for that. In the projects that we executed and we used ABAP Git or we used Git, it was very hard, and ABAP lock was indeed a challenge. The best adventures that I saw, but I haven't experienced in a live project, is the usage of Docker containers. So each one of the developers would have their own stack, and they would they would pull in and push out the code on a necessarily basis. But in my opinion, that demands a high level of modularization of the code. So commit frequently and commit very small pieces of code. But locks are still a challenge, and I don't the only way to work around them is via governance and team communication, which sounds silly, but that's the only way that I could work with in the projects that I use it. The usage of test-driven development tends to facilitate that, because your code becomes much more modularized. It's much smaller, so you don't it's very rare to have a very chunk of code, a report or a long class or a long method that you are locking for a long time. Usually you have something failing, or you are building something that is quite small. You are writing some tests, you are finishing that and committing, and you are unlocking that. But it's really a kind of team effort to orchestrate your actions, who is dealing with what, lots of communication and so on. Technically, there is nothing that I know to go around it. Yeah, proper package hierarchy. Yep. Exactly. It's in legacy projects, or when you're dealing with legacy codes, it's quite impossible and very disencouraging to go and use it Git. Usually when you are starting a project from the scratch and you have your team getting together and idealizing the project, it's something that's easy for you and the peers to align with. But when you need to deal with legacy code, it's quite tricky. Then for legacy code, I would suggest the book dealing with legacy code. Usually what you need to do is actually put together a project to get your legacy and make it testable and modularize and break it down. But honestly, it's very difficult to find management or find sponsorship for that in any company or in any kind of team. But yeah, locks are still a nightmare and stupid, in my opinion.
Indeed. More questions? Okay, if not, we can thank you, Pedro. Nice
Guys,
one.
so yeah, I'll just I'll need to leave you because I'm 2 hours ahead and I need to put my kids into bed. So I just came by to do the presentation and have this chat with you. I will look into the recording later, but thank you very much. You guys have my contact. Reach out anytime you need and exchange ideas. And again, thank you very much for your invitation, Mauricio.
No worries. Whenever we have a backlog we use in Git, we will call you.
No, except that. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. Okay, then we can move to the next session, which is going to be presented by Thiago. So, Thiago. Is you or no?
Thanks, Mauricio. Thanks, Pedro. Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's just get that going, right? So, all right. Some of you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
And I hope that is a slide because I cannot see that at the moment. So,
just a desktop.
Oh man, okay, just bear with me. Okay, that was a bad start. Let's just try again. All right. Okay. Cool. It's better now.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. So, all right. So, a little bit about myself. So, I'm working for SAP Signavio since April this year. Before that, I was an SAP Solutions Architect, SAP developer, and I have been working in and out the SAP ecosystem for the past 15 years. Just some interesting topics you can criticize me about. My first programming language was really a VB script built for these Palm OS handspring devices. My favorite UI5 theme is still the Gold Reflection. I think that was one of the best ones ever made. And here in Australia, I like to support the mainly Oringa Sea Eagles. Please feel free to unmute yourself and criticize me a little bit if you need to. If not, we can just move ahead. Right, so what is Signavio? What is process mining? Okay. How that connects back to SAP, and again, what is in for us as SAP consultants and SAP customers with this acquisition and with this new tool set. Yeah, I guess I'll probably ask a question before, like from you guys, and please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. What's your experience with process mining? Okay.
We're partners with UiPath, mate, and certainly your product has now come up in conversations recently, given my interest in using process and task mining, feeding it back into my test tools, my test automation tools. So I'd be happy to catch up with you at a later. I've developed a methodology which I presented to Tricentis and UiPath, and it wasn't very well received at all. They were very upset with me for even thinking of doing that. But my pure testing brain thinks like that, and I can see with getting rid of half of my BAs in process mining activities, and that's what opening line when I'm presenting to federal government in Canberra is around how would you like to lose 50% of your BAs costs, and they're very keen to hear more about that.
All right, yeah, no, let's definitely follow up on that later. Yeah, that's good. I can see a lot of people. Yeah, thank you, Mark. I can see a lot of people talking about Celonis. That is a great process mining tool. Yeah, I think Celonis probably was the first big enterprise type of mining tool that we had in the market. And if you're familiar with Celonis, you probably understand the concept of process mining, right? So, all right, I'll just explain a little bit what Signavio Suite is. Maybe I can use Celonis as a reference for just for the sake of description. So what the Signavio Suite is a composition of three components with the collaboration hub connecting all the dots. You have your process manager that bringing to the SAP space overlaps a little bit with the solution manager. That is like your repository for your process, your diagrams and everything related to that. With a better user experience, of course, when comparing with Solution Manager. I know everyone loves Solution Manager from the bottom of their hearts, but yeah, yeah, you can see someone laughing. Yeah, I share that. It's Look, it's a great tool, right? But I guess from all the SAP ecosystem in the world, I may know like about 10 or 12 people that are able to really make solution managers sing the song it was supposed to sing. So it's like buying a Saab, right? It's a great car, but look, you don't have a mechanic for that. So I guess you shouldn't do that, right? But I'm not supposed to say that. Let's just erase that from the recording later. Then you have your process intelligence. That is just a renaming of process mining inside the SAP Signavio. Your workflow accelerator, that really is just to help you to manage your process. And again, the collaboration hub connecting everything. Is a little bit, I'll show you the system later. So just conscious of time, I will just move a little bit faster. So process mining, again, is this new, well, not so new really, but it was new for me, right? Maybe it's new for you as well. New theory that connects BI, data mining, and process science, and tries to build a visualization of your process, right? Or data related to your process. So what process mining tries to do is provide insights that you can then transform into action based on your process behavior that is based in your source system. And the way we do that is by analyzing the digital footprints that every process will leave when you execute that in the system, right? So going back to an SAP space, for example, you have your procure to pay process, right? Where let's say this line over here is how a functional consultant may be looking to the process, and maybe you as a developer will be looking somewhere over here, either in the data objects or the SAP tables, right? And what we try to do is to capture all the single events that are happening in the system into, let's say, identifying the timestamp. So for example, create purchase order, this is the local date, and this is my ID, right? So we will combine that into one record over here. That will be one event in that execution. And I'll just go back a few steps to explain a little bit of the naming convention here. So you can see what is a case. So a case is an execution of an end-to-end process. One event will be one single step in this execution. So when I say event, it's just an execution of a step in the process, and a case is a unique execution of your end-to-end process. Any questions so far? Is maybe too fast or too slow?
All good.
Good, cool. I see you're talking about the integration with Soman. I do like that. I really do, because I think Soman is still very relevant from a repository perspective, and the way it manages the SAP landscape, it is still good. But having that integration where you can pull data from Soman into Signavio, you do all your transformation there, you use that to really control your process and push that back to Soman. That really works quite well. All right, it's moving ahead a little bit. Oh yeah, here just explain a little bit the two type of events or tables we're trying to build. One is your event log, that really is just a list of all the events and timestamps in which they happen with your case ID, and your case attributes, that is just data from your process that then you use to slice and dice the information you have. All right, and then what you can or what you should try to achieve with process mining really is to one, discover your process and understand what really is happening under the hood. Oh, sorry. and use that to one, again, go back to the business, say, hey, this is what you believe is happening, and this is what the system is telling you, and use that to provide some insights and conduct that to a transformation or a data-driven transformation, if you will. I'll send these slides to you later. I really don't like slides, so I'll just move back to show you how Signavio looks like. And again, if you have any questions, please just feel free to Yeah. Oh, sorry, guys. Okay. All right. Are you guys able to see my Signavio landing page?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Cool. Very well. So this is one of, let's say, the ways Signavio and SAP are proposing to use Signavio together. So having Signavio as the driver for S/4HANA transformation projects, right? So let's say you can start with this dashboard, and what you see over here is the different steps in a transformation project and where Signavio will be used. So first one is really to discover your process, define goals and scope, analyze the current state, define your target state, and then you go, let's say, your proper implementation, right? So not really much from Signavio in steps 5 and 6, I guess. But then after you have the up and running, you go back to do a continuous improvement, continuous development on that. And then the way we try to go about that is to provide a governance dashboard. And here you are reading data from the internal Signavio workflow to understand how much of your internal process were executed and how much of that was approved. How is your transformation life cycle by process? And just go back on screen here. And also having workflows to propose and control and understand how, again, you go in a project to really transform your process, right? So let's say I want to start my scope for the order to cash. You select the user you want to interact with, and there you go. Right, any questions so far? Again, I am a bit conscious of time, so I'm trying to rush a little bit, but not too much. Okay, I understand the silence, as please keep going. Right, and then I would deep dive a little bit more in how to do the transformation in one particular problem. So this here is the particular subset of process of order to cash related to the credit management. And what we did is we create 3 different investigations to that. One to understand how the as-is process actually is, reading data from the source system. Then understanding that we will find some issues, or we found some issues. We did a simulation in how it should be. And then after migration, let's say the investigation is ready and waiting for data to be plugged in, right? So if we go one by one, you see our current analysis, and this is how investigation will look like. You have your discovery widget that is able to, let's say, translate the event log into this spaghetti noodle diagram. And then you can see how your process flow is going through. You can see, and then again, you can control over here how thick these arrows will be based on occurrences or in cycle time. And then you can see, for example, there are potentially some bottlenecks over here because the calculating credit score is being executed maybe too many times. And that occurrence also is related to a cycle time of more than 1 day when you need to do that again. And that may be a bottleneck in your overall process. So what you may want to do is, again, a few details over here and a few volumetrics, understanding the total customer assessments. And then that's one detail over here that Signavio is probably a little bit more process oriented than Celonis, is that, let me just open this one over here. So you can see your process, right? And then let me just open the second one. Let's say this one over here. Oh, it's not anymore. Okay, I lost it. Yeah, I need to open a second investigation to show you guys that. But let's say you have your first interaction over here, right? Where you have your credit analysis being done by SAP in the ST space. And then the second one, you have the same diagram, but with some new steps in blue, doing that by FSCM. And what we can do is to understand that better via process simulation, right? So for example, this is the current process, and we are ignoring these 3 steps. They are here, but they don't have any resource or allocation executing that. And we want to see how that happens for 1 week of work. This is what we see, right? So I'm executing all the cases. You can see bottlenecks happening over here, and just 5 cases really went through during this week. And then you have, let's say, your total cost, your cycle time for the overall process, and all the bottlenecks being popped into here. All this information, again, you have your frequencies and our resources over here. You can see there are like, sorry, this is the 2P, right? You have like 5 people doing credit controller and 34 in the sales representative, and that is generating a bottleneck on the credit controller. Whereas if you change to the 2B, after analyzing that, we suggest maybe you split your resources. You want to have 10 people over here, and you want to start using SAP FCM more often. That will reduce your cost and maybe increase the time, but then you are able to execute all your cases. So that's something usually the clients find very helpful in providing, let's say, what's the best scenario and how do we go about that? Yeah, is any of that making any sense to you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right, so this is our demo environment, so we don't have live data in this one, but I will just pop in a different one and explain to you guys how do we really make that happen, right? So this is the ETL component of Signavio, and you consider 3 SAP boxes down here and then a Postgre one. And you'll have plenty of adapters to choose from. You have Google BigQuery, Salesforce, ServiceNow. So really, it is an SAP product, but it is technology agnostic in that regard. You can connect to AWS, Snowflake, and you can do, sorry, an OData call directly to the API endpoint, right? Having that connection over here, and that is really just, I shouldn't show the IPs here, right? But please, we can erase that later in the recording. But then what that allows me to do is to select a whole bunch of tables and fields that I'll be using. So in this one, we are interested in doing the order to cash scenario. So you have our friend BKPF, BSAG, and all of that, as this was an ECC backend. And then what we do is we have a whole modeling over here of all the objects and all the events inside of that. So let's say your create delivery, very good traditional SQL statement to understand how that is happening, right? Yeah. And for those who are probably trying to make sense of the SQL statement, this is an Athena-based statement, and you can probably use a little bit of Presto as well. So yeah. All right, so with that in place, what that allows you to do is to import all the data into one investigation. And then you can really understand your process. So for example, this order to cash, we're reading data from one SAP system, right? And we know a few issues. So we know there are like some long running cases, they are using down payment and they are not really tracking that very well. And there are some events with the incorrect order happening. So yeah, and this is how Signavio will represent all that. So you have your widgets, you have your process flow happening over here. You can understand, and it's very easy to manipulate as well. So let's say I want to see these cases over time, you just do that and you can see it. You want to see that, for example, by delivery type, you can also see that. Yeah, it's a very friendly and Jupyter-based type of display. Right, and then I guess this is a very short demonstration, again, conscious of time. So any questions so far or any comments? Does Signavio also, sorry.
I was going to say there is one comment and happening in the comment section. It's that what would be the value for that in the greenfield implementation?
In the greenfield implementation, that is a good point, right? So I shouldn't, but I'll ask that with a question, right? In your last S4HANA 2020 or 1909 project, does your SAP experts were really knowing what they are doing? Right? And then a second question, does your customer really knew what the SEC used to do process-wise? Right, so I guess that's where Signavio comes into place, or any process mining tool really. So the first step is really proving to the client what is really happening in their system. So if you have an ECC box, whatever is the version, most of the cases, the client believes something's happened, but what the system is doing is something different to some extent. So even if they say, yeah, we're using your, I don't know, your G45 best practices, yeah, we're using that, and that's vanilla execution. Maybe 5% of the cases are not doing that. And of course, they're doing this 5%, you know, yeah, 5% of the cases are doing that. Like, it's not a data-driven decision. It's someone else's opinion, right? So they don't have any data to base the decision they are doing. So they're starting in a new, your comment's not relevant for the greenfield. That is correct. It's not relevant for the greenfield yet. I'll get to that point, right? Yeah, no, it's
I may have a scenario where this could be relevant, and as you said, so how do you know whether the consultants firm is applying the best practices? How do you know whether the consultants firm implementing your greenfield is really doing S4 processes, not just using old ECC process or old ECC approach for a new S4HANA project?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And then that's the second bit in how Signavio can also help, right? And that's not only Signavio, it's Signavio with the SAP umbrella can come into place to provide advice, right? And then, again, that probably would be just my personal opinion. I see not only with the Signavio acquisition, but with a few different movements, SAP is trying to get back to what SAP used to be in the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, where SAP is saying, hey, we are providing the expertise, right? We understand how the process should look like, and now we're providing you with a tool set that you can use. And the greenfield implementation also falls into place in the way you can, let's say, trace that back to your best practice. So you can load in all the best practices scenarios inside Signavio, and you can do that during testing and UAT, and you can validate your data against that. So I get your point. It's not so valid when you're doing an investigation of the as-is scenario because you don't have that, or at least you don't have that coming from an SAP perspective, but you may have that from some sort of system, right? So, yeah.
So just to tag along on that one, I mean, I'm just trying to understand from a greenfield implementation, let's say the customer is not at all using an ERP and now they want to get onto S4HANA. I mean, my thought process was they would still need to be first able to understand what are the processes they need to be they need to run on their system, and as you said, be able to baseline on any best practices and see what is actually best for them in that industry, and then be most importantly also collaborate with their business users to understand if this is the way we intend to run this particular process, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to be running it. Right, so I still see, a lot of other aspects of Signavio coming into play to support that, and enabling those processes to be implemented in the way that we want it to.
Yeah,
would that be still a fair point?
Absolutely, Murali. I think Murali is spot on that. So let's say maybe the PI component is not as useful as the workflow manager or the collaboration hub as the first entry point. but the whole Signavio suite is built for that. So yeah, it's your entry point for defining your process and understanding how that really works, bringing users together to validate that, define your scope, and then move to actually build and deploy your solution, right? And then, of course, your investigation will come into place as soon as you have some data coming from the new system. And yeah, and let's say again, assuming the client doesn't have any ERP to move from, yeah, then you don't have that as a scenario, but you still have baseline from different industries that SAP can provide to you, and you can use that as a baseline or as a benchmark for whatever you're building. So yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And wouldn't you be able to also use it to benchmark the build against the requirements definition? So whatever you started out with initially as that very early stage, early doors, you'd be able to surely be able to use it for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Cool. Those are great points. Yeah, that's actually very good. Yeah, any other question? I can see a lot of questions in the chat over here. So does Signavio also supply predefined scenarios? Yes, we do. Probably not as many as Celonis, but we do. We have an order to cash and procurement to pay for both SAP ECC and S4HANA, and a few others that are not SAP specific for ServiceNow, Salesforce, and Infor. So yeah. Cool. All right. Let me just.
I think there is one last question asking about the integration roadmap.
Integration roadmap. Yeah. Okay. So that's a great.
If it's going to be embedded in S4 in the future, or.
I don't think it will be embedded in S4HANA. I think it will be part of the SAP BTP. That's how they're calling it now. But not in, let's say, not as a component of S4HANA itself. Regarding the integration, the roadmap, it goes in two directions. One is to leverage the existing SAP ecosystem via SAP.intelligence. And the second one is in establishing more adapters as we go for the existing SAP products as SuccessFactors and SAP Analytics Cloud, for example. So yeah. Cool.
Sorry, so I'll probably just go to the question directly. So in case of SAC, would it be possible in the future to include process mapping to, well, along with other executive reports?
Yeah, so you're probably saying you wanted to surface something from Signavio inside SAC. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is possible. I think the tricky bit over there will be the authentication and authorization in between the two components. But let's say if neither on the Signavio box or the SAC box there is anything too weird, it should be possible for you to embed something from Signavio inside SAC. Yes.
Is there any current use case? Because we've been trying to do that, but just can't find a right component in SAC that can actually consume.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, look, I'm happy. Yeah, maybe just send me an email after the meeting, and I'm happy to help you with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any more questions or comments? Sorry, guys, if I am rushing too much. It's just, yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll probably just show one more slide over here that, yeah, shine, right? So what is Informe, right? So as an SAP customer, I can have access to tailor roadmaps for my needs, right? So it's not some generic, hey, this is your best practices. This is based on your system usage so far. And that will come into place a little bit more with BPI and process insights. Again, you can leverage the SAP expertise in the form of KPI and user metrics that are specific to your industry. And what I believe is the better benefit is you really can have data-driven and non-political information to convey your transformation, right? Because again, trying to ask a question to answer a question, right? From your last SAP S/4HANA transformation projects, what was the use case, right? And I guess most of you say, hey, the existing version was running out of maintenance, right? So that, from the business perspective, that's just a cost, is an IT cost. So when you change that picture and say, hey, we want to move to S/4HANA so we can fix this process, and by doing so, we're saving the money, I don't know, X amount of money, right, for the business. That is not a cost anymore, that's an investment. And then the buy-in is not only from IT, it's also from the executive operators of the company, right? Because it's not only an IT project, it's a business project. And I think Signavio really help, or at least it's helping me to get into the business door, not the IT door anymore. So that's, again, going back to the SAP of the 90s, right? We're doing business with the business, not with the IT only. So yeah. And I guess for us consultants, that is also relevant because I guess it creates a different magnitude of what you're doing, right? You are not only there building some custom code and all of that, you're there to solve a problem. And the user was involved in the definition of the process, and the user knows and has data to prove how the process was before, and knows what the goal is for the to-be process. Yeah, that's it. And again, I'll send you guys this slide deck. You can read it, and you can please feel free to send any comments to me. That was it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thiago. So guys, if you have any question, speak up. Very interesting. We can see a lot of transformation happening in the SAP environment. That's a very exciting time to be working with SAP. Good stuff, good stuff. Thanks, Thiago. Yeah, and then later on, well, I will gather the presentations and I will share with everybody. Probably I will upload them to the blog post or something like that. We will figure out how we're going to share these contents.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you again, Mauricio.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now moving on to Mark. So Mark, the stage is all yours now.
Thank you so much, sir. Just going to share my screen. Everyone see that? No.
Yes.
You can see my PowerPoint presentation?
No.
No, we see pretty much everything but
other than
the
that,
presentation.
yeah. No, where are we? Back in here. What has happened here? I was working earlier today.
If you want, I can present my screen.
Yeah, put it up there, mate, and I'll pick it up
worries.
from there. It's no problem at all.
All right.
So thanks everyone for your time. It's been great. My first time here, I definitely will be coming back. What we actually have done at Vertec, we're a very small company. And when I say that, we're 40 people. We specialize in if you want to go to the second slide, mate, I've developed a number of methodologies. My background is the last 20 years, senior program test manager, test consultant, I half own Vertec, moved to Canberra just as COVID hit, which meant a lovely 3.5 months in an idyllic little seaside town in northern New South Wales, fishing and doing my business from the boat. But then reality set in, and I'm now in Canberra, where I initially in the 90s started my career in IT. So Vertec Professional Services Company, we focus on a couple of niches only. One is a thing called NextThink, which is end user experience monitoring of devices that's been quite explosive in growth, and we took that over February 2020, and I've done about $5 million worth of business in that time. It was just fortunate that that company backed out of Australia and COVID hit. And so we were off talking to people about what's happening with his staff. Mary, who's worked with Bill, Ted and Brian for the last 35 years, is suddenly at home, working from home, and we're noting that she's only having 8 minutes for lunch every day and working a 12-hour day. Good news stories for CEOs and the like. Windows Evergreen, your standard transformation. My business partner's done 2.5–3 million desktops worldwide, was the youngest CIO of Barclays Retail in the UK at 20 years of age. He now lives on the Gold Coast and enjoys all the benefits of the Gold Coast, where our head office is. Automated testing, which I'll touch on tonight, and robotic process automation, which we were just looking at a moment ago with Signavio. Certainly this presentation is something that I've been taking out to university. So this is as much about SAP automation and test automation as it is about something I'm really passionate about, given I'm really old at 60 this year and have been doing IT for the last 30 years, around enabling other people to get into IT. And I often use the analogy, I come from the Hunter Valley, where all my family are Catholic coal miners. And unless you knew the pit deputy or the head of the mine, you can't get into mining. I think that's a lot of that happening when I go to universities, talk to career counsellors, talk to people around what's happening where, like my son just finished a computing science degree 2 years ago. I said, well, what do they tell you to do, son? He said, I'll go and be a games developer. I said, oh yeah, you and 20 million Japanese, Indian people with 10 years commercial experience that I can get for $15 an hour, you know, that's probably not a good area to target unless you've got some super intelligent idea. And at the moment, yeah, no, he's been working for us for 18 months, and he's about to go and become a junior software designer thereafter. We have an education and learning, which is mostly what this presentation's about, and recruitment and talent management as well. Thanks so much, Mauricio. And I'm conscious of time, so I'll move through this as quickly as possible, given I believe most of the people on this call are, or this senior persons. So why the opportunity? So what we've noticed was, and I've been, by the way, I held courses 15 years ago where I enabled and mentored people from personal assistants into being test analysts. So I always said test analyst wasn't for geniuses, and it isn't something that hard to break into, which I believe is the opportunity. But COVID, the tyranny of distance. So we bring a hell of a lot of people into Australia via the E457 visa system. That's now been shut down. We're noticing, especially in federal government, which is my mandate at the moment, unique skills shortages. So on the first presenter, Pedro spoke about Tricentis Tosca. I've been partners. I was the first partner in Australia with Tricentis since 2011. I met the two managing directors of Asia Pac in that time and understood what they were talking about when I was going to a real estate seminar and met two semi-literate Austrian people talking about model-based test automation. But the skills shortage is very pronounced because of things such as the tyranny of distance and the disruption to traditional working conditions. So COVID. It has changed the way we're doing work. We're seeing our private sector clients not going back to their offices. They're hiring a WeWork for half a day a week for the senior management team, where one of our clients is Morris Blackburn. They're saving 25 million annually on commercial leases. So the paradigm of how we're working is changing, and I'm sure everyone on the call is seeing the same things in terms of working from home or being in lockdown. And we see that as a significant opportunity as well as downside for some people. But there's also what we call the skills, I call it the skills revolution or evolution, which is demands of the modern workplace. So how do we talked about DevOps earlier. How do we deliver more quickly? How do we incorporate lots of technologies, including SAP? How does SAP integrate with those technologies and keep us on a safe path? And we've got some magnificent tools out there, of which Tricentis Tosca is one of them, or the Tricentis suite is one of them. So we've looked and focused on skill specialization according to niches. So end user compute and device management, test automation for SAP, which is what this course I've taken to the marketplace is about. We're in negotiations with Services Australia as one to pathway programs. So taking grads, putting them through an intensive course because they're paying $1,400 a day for BAs to do a lot of the tasks that we were just looking at with Signavio, to capture as-is processes, because I think agile in a lot of ways, from what I've been observing, has been an excuse to disperse with documentation and that as-is state. And when I watch teams do agile sprints, they spend half of the 1 week or the 2 weeks trying to find out from users who don't want to be in the room what the actual as-is state is. So anyway, I'm in there working with Services Australia on these types of issues. And the education sector, we go and speak to the careers advisors, as I said before, at unis. It's frightening. And when I speak to the students as well, you know, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a software developer. Okay, where are you going to go? This is ANU and UCAN here in Canberra. They've got no idea. So I've been showing people the differences between doing job interviews and CVs and the like for private sector versus public sector, those avenues and pathways into the different respective organisations or types of organisations for 20 years. So I've documented all of that and have it as part of this course. Thank you so much. Just stop me. I'll go on, I press the button, I can keep going for hours. So yeah, just stop me whenever you need to. So I'm telling people, these younger folk, this is the greatest opportunity I've seen since Y2K in terms of getting into the industry. And this is a huge opportunity. We're seeing it with SAP in Canberra. They just can't get enough people. We've got partnerships with DXC. We're about to sign off with PwC and IBM for testing as a service. Or test automation as a service, particularly in the SAP space, using Tricentis Tosca. But we're also seeing around test automation. So that whole idea of capture playback, back in the 80s when I was a musician part-time, we had 6 notes we could capture in a loop on the old Juno 6 synthesizers. We went to coding in terms of these hard-coded static frameworks like Selenium, not HPQC, which is now Micro Focus ALM, of course. We've now got Tricentis, low code, no code. The sales guys at Tricentis will tell you 2 months, you can be everything to everyone. When I'm talking to clients, I'm saying it's a minimum 9-month conversion journey. If you're going to buy a tool, you've got to have to commit that long. So I'm sort of trying to demystify the steak knife salesman out there as well and tell it from how I see it and how I've experienced it in my role. So I've had teams of up to 400 people, testers, onshore, offshore. I did Transport for New South Wales, Wave Zero, SAP. That was very interesting from many aspects, but managing all the testers scattering in different directions despite your directions around here is a template, please just write it like this. Never works out that way. So this is one of the major issues around adoption with regards to DevOps and agile processes. Tricentis, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, mandates and auto writes the test cases for you. So this is probably good supplementary information to what Pedro was talking about in a different aspect earlier. T-code accelerator packs, over 600 T-codes, and I'll talk about that, are already pre-scripted. They exist in the enterprise license for Tricentis. I met them, and when I found out about it 2 years ago, I said to the managing director of Asia Pac, Dominic Weisbrook from Tricentis, why aren't you promoting this as a program test manager? You give me 600 pre-developed T-code automated test cases. That sells me straight up because I can get rid of I don't need as many humans involved. He said, Mark, we bought it, paid millions for it, incorporated it in the enterprise suite. We can't make any money off it now, so we don't promote it. And I went, oh my God, that's such an Austrian thing to do. So yeah, all the program test managers I know in Australia, all the test managers, they all love that idea of these accelerator packs. And certainly Tricentis has them now for Salesforce, ServiceNow. So I'm seeing that type of utility come into play around the big ERP systems, around the big COTS products in the marketplace. And finally, training. So we're going to be training these people in an S4HANA environment. You'll see, I'll show you the schedule towards the end of what I'm calling for a career shifter, which is originally was for butcher, baker, candlestick maker. where I envisage morphing people across. But what's happened is most of the people wanting to sign up for the course are testers with 1 to 2 years experience who want to move into SAP and test automation, which has been surprising. And perhaps my reach isn't right, given I'm not a marketing guy, I'm just an old testing guy, to the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, but certainly large demand to get into a real S4HANA environment, be trained initially in the top 30, 40 business processes for finance, teaching them how to use the accelerator scripts and getting them certified. 5 levels of certification, including the SAP module for Tricentis. Thanks, Mauricio. So who are Tricentis? Does everyone on the call basically know who they are?
Thank you.
No? They're SAP partner of choice in Asia Pac last year. August 2019, they were announced as SAP's global testing partner. So they've taken over the mantle previously occupied by HP and in turn Micro Focus when they bought them out. Incredibly smart test automation. They're enterprise leader. This is the sales pitch stuff here, but enterprise grade, which everything else won't do for you. So Selenium will do your web-based stuff, do particulars around open source, but can't go back to your old green screen. So I'm talking to Services Australia now about that problem because they've got a team of 40 Selenium developers. What can we do, Mark? I'm not telling them to get rid of Selenium. I'm just saying we can incorporate it into the end-to-end test processes. So reuse your collateral, your financial spend, your organizational spend on developing these other tools. Tricentis with minimum effort incorporates Jira, all of the HP ALM, all of them. So really smart thinking on their behalf to think about that idea as well. But AI-driven technology for easy adoption. So it's like a telephone, I guess. We don't necessarily need to know what the internal workings of a telephone are in order to be able to use AI. And certainly, yeah, lots of people say to me, well, I don't know anything about that. I said, well, just coincidentally, neither do I. I know a little bit about it, enough to talk to C-class people about it, and enough to talk about philosophies and concepts around how people can take their organisations on transformational journeys with regards to delivery and quality assurance. Thanks so much. So model-based test automation enables extreme automation rates. So back in the day, back in the 90s and 2000s, you're looking at 25%. Department of Immigration, I had 40,000 automated test scripts, which used to take Friday before every release to do a regression test of the whole environment. We started on Friday night with 40 machines, 15 guys on site, and finished Sunday night. Typically had 5,000 defects, of which, you know, there was 5 defects times 1,000 times. We unpicked those overnight and allowed them to start on the Monday morning. We can typically go to 90,000. We're not waiting now to assess who's going to be included in the regression model. It's way beyond that. And what Pedro was touching on before around, and what the question I asked him around, are the developers using things like orchestrated services virtualization to create stubs and harnesses in compartmentalized or containerized environments, is exactly what we want. We don't want to be test professionals don't want to be back in that part. We want to integrate as many test phases into one amorphous lump with quality gates inbuilt into those, so we can get to these extreme automation rates. Because at the moment, testing slows down development 40%. That's Capgemini, that's IBM are telling us that, because of these antiquated ways of doing manual or clunky automation. So we want to get away from that and get to the point where we can go to these extreme automation rates. Companies like Google doing, you know, a release a day. They're Tricentis clients. They run massive regression suites, automated regression suites around what they're releasing on a daily basis. So it enables seamless transition from manual to automated testing. Not quite, that's a bit of sales speak again, but it is incredibly simple. It's not hard. And when we take teams on site, we typically use our grads or our people with 1 to 2 years experience to do those transitions under the leadership of a senior test analyst. But it is that simple. We can trust them to do that, bring them across into end-to-end enterprise testing. Covers UI and non-UI test automation. Risk-based test case design. So I just wrote an article recently about the pain of having to trust humans to do my risk analysis, my coverage analysis. The tool automatically provides you with information on what your highest priority is, using model-based test automation and AI to scan the underlying technology, the design, and gives you the information. A little bit similar to Signavio and what it does with processes and offline processing and ratios of return on investment. All those smart things are now provided to you rather than me relying on humans, me on a Zoom meeting with somewhere, another country even, trying to ascertain that information. It allows you to align your business priorities, your test planning and execution. Pulls them all together in a suite, as we saw, as Pedro was trying to show us. I would suggest that Pedro, he probably didn't know this, but the demo environment for Tricentis, because they have a few challenges with their demo environment, typically gets turned off at 6 p.m. in Melbourne for their global demo environment. So there's a few, that's probably why he couldn't hook up to them. Another great thing, when I'm running teams of 400 and 400 people, we write all these duplicitous test cases that don't even really demonstrate or understand coverage. This tool points out your highest priority, your highest areas of risk, and you base your, and typically that's around integration points, surprise, surprise, and you focus on those areas rather than SAP out of the box. Why even bother? Do it once, park it. If it doesn't get upgraded, if there's no functional patch upgrades, nothing else going on, just leave it in your regression suite, but don't spend any effort on it. It works. And shift focus from the number of test cases to risk coverage. Orchestrated service virtualization, I've spoken about, but it simulates the behavior of services needed for testing. So, you know, waiting for Fujitsu to deliver an environment on a server farm, or we've got to go and get a box from somewhere, or we've got to do something, or reg isn't available to 3 weeks' time. All that's gone. And so you can start and speed up all of those ideas. It allows testing to take place earlier in the dev process. So the big push is to take this right back into your development teams in SAP. Same thing in SAP. As I said before, I talked about the program, the large program I was on for pathology in Queensland Health, where the first 6 weeks, development and architect were very reticent to use the tool once they understood what it could do for them, and they weren't waiting on environment managers and all different types of people to help them. I, in fact, had them doing unit and system tests. So we integrated those, we put the quality gates around them. As long as you've got your safeguards from a test and quality perspective, there doesn't seem to be as many problems with adoption, because at the end of the day, that's their reputation, if you look at it from their perspective. And it reduces in time and cost of end-to-end testing. So the days of, next point, test data management, you know, like setting up data and then someone else goes and use it. You've got to put petitioning systems in place. You've got to have mass meetings with mass amounts of people around, this is our range of data, please don't use it. Of course, someone goes and uses it, or they go and use it and don't uphold their test schedule, and you lose a lot. This tool creates synthetic data that can be reused all the way up to what was called user acceptance testing back in the day. And it does it quickly. It's agnostic to technology, so it green screens I had 400 legacy apps on that SAP project at Transport for New South Wales, 7 different environments across the 5 fiefdoms that had been forced together under the banner of Transport for New South Wales. So trains, roads and maritime services, they were all there. They all hated each other. They didn't want to talk to anyone. So getting an end-to-end test there was very challenging, and putting people in the room together who never met each other but hated each other just based on emails and Zoom meetings and Skype meetings was a very interesting exercise. Reduces your manual test execution. So I can absolutely put my hand on my heart and say 60 to 80%. So a classic example, my first Tricentis project, 2012, was a finance transformation for roads and maritime services in Sydney. They had 7 weeks, 7 people doing user acceptance regression testing of their upgrades every year. We turned that into a Monday morning in 3 hours. And they just went me as soon as I came in the room and said, right, here's your defects. Like, they didn't believe me. So I slowed the script down, which you can do with Tricentis. Is this your test case? Yes. Is this how? And stepped them through at each step. Did it a couple of times, 10 minutes. They were wow. So we can actually accelerate and take that 40% blocker away significantly by the execution using smart automation. And stateful test data management is the key for high automation. So again, how do you create the data? How do you reuse it? How can you quickly replicate it? How do you share that strategy around data for ETL? Tricentis actually have a great data module as well, which is a separate purchase price to the enterprise license. But at the moment, yeah, the world's still just catching up with the testing component. Thanks so much. So these accelerator packs allow organisations to expedite their project delivery with a small amount of customisation effort to update pre-developed automated test sequences. Changes the plant test planning phase. So you're going and plugging those in, you're then aligning them with whatever the configuration is for the project, rather than writing 25-step test cases, rote writing almost, around actual result, expected result, and whatever the statement is initially. You know, go to the new hire employee field in bloody. Very onerous, and yeah, certainly males don't suit that type of test work. I always found middle-aged females can focus for 8 hours on that. Males are thinking about the cricket or surfing or whatever. And really hard on big efforts over a long period of time in a waterfall model. The amount of attrition around peer reviews on test cases that are wrong takes all that away. Auto produces your test cases. I love it. So pre-built for 600 plus most requested transactions. Suitable for ECC and S4HANA. Latest versions of the Tosca best practices. So Tosca got some got 100 million venture capital a couple of years ago. I believe they're going to market IPOing next year. So I've seen the growth in them around their marketing. Their sales are still, you can tell they're a technology-led company and still got major techno persons in charge, but nonetheless gone ahead in leaps and bounds in the last 3 years. Built for SAP Fiori using Launchpad tiles or SAP GUI. Coverage of sales, procurement, finance, plant maintenance, and production planning modules. So it doesn't have payroll and or success factors, but I believe success factors is coming. And a new accelerator packs build according. So we can custom build, and that's certainly something we're talking about, doing some custom build for Queensland Health at the moment. So we can do it as required. Thank you, Mauricio. So we look at the other element of what we're offering here. It's Tricentis certified training. This is your typical pathways that Tricentis offer you out of the box. So remembering, this is for people who are transitioning over into a career in IT or someone with 1 to 2 years experience. So what we're doing, and I'll show you the schedule next, is saying, yes, we've done all of these. We have the people who are, there's only 13 certified test architects in Asia Pac. We have one of them in Vertec in our little 40-person company. But we've been through all these certifications, and some of it's horrific. And so we hear stories of people, these courses are free. You can go in there and do them, but there's things like the exams are conducted on different versions of what they've trained you in as you're going through modules. So just little tricks for new players. We've done all of this. We know all of this. So we're going to lead classroom-led modules so these people can get to TD, if you look at the middle one. So Test Design Specialist 1 and 2, plus what they call AS1, AS2, which is Introduction to Tricentis. So our people, and for SAP, there's a SAP module as well, which is only a couple of days. You can get certified in, but all of the people that come out of the course will have the 5 levels of certification. So 95% of the community who are Tricentis certified and users out in the contracting and IT world have AS1 only. So we're sort of hanging our hat on on getting these people certified up, obviously irrelevant unless you've got somewhere to do it. And that's why we do it in a real S4 environment with real test scenarios. Thank you so much, Mauricio. So this is a course for the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker over a year, which happens on a Tuesday and Thursday evening. So you can see initially we're introducing people to SAP. We then go introduce the SAP Finance and then start to get them into, on a Tuesday and Thursday night, 2.5 hours at a time, into Tricentis, starting at the start, which is AS1, and Business Process 1. So SAP Finance Business Process 1 is around, and the structure of it is around, we show you with a process map, just like the last presenter had up for Signavio, a business process to demonstrate to people how it works. We then take you in, take the student in and walk them through. And you guys would all know this, but we take them in, we take them through the scenario in the S4HANA environment, and we then take them through and show them how it looks in Tricentis. So we're demonstrating theory, we're talking to the background to that particular business process, and then we're going in and practically showing them. That occurs and happens over a 12-month period. So by the time these people come out, and at the moment, well, like I said, we've got some pathways program, and we're talking to Services Australia and a couple of big federal government departments here. All they want us to do is train them in a thing called SAFE, big S, big A, big F, small e, methodology, and get them a security clearance. And we're going, guys, you want to do this, you know, why aren't you doing this? So I think the tipping point's going to hit with the resource shortage, because I know PEGA, SAP, they're trying to bring people in and think they can upskill them. Like I met with Defence, I met 8 lieutenant colonels, mid-30s from Defence, had a few beers with them and said, you know, what can we do for you? And I said, well, I want to help you with IBM and Infosys around what you're going to face with the current SAP tranches in Canberra. And they, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, you can't do that by yourself. You don't have the expertise from a UAT, SIT3 acceptance perspective. I'll come in and train your people on how to do it. They went, Mark, we kill people in Afghanistan. We do this. We're very capable. We've told SAP, we've told, this is what the head guy told me, we've told IBM, we're the army. I said, look, mate, no offence to you, and I won't tell you his name, because he's on Mr. Morrison's digital transformation steering committee, but you cannot replace a 10-year person in SAP with a person with 1 or 2 years experience. Can't be done. It's impossible. I've been doing this for SAP transformations for 15 years, and I'm telling you, if you think you can do that because you carried a rifle in Afghanistan, you're delusional. And I said, I'll tell you what else is going to happen. We will enable these people over a 2-year period, because they want to bring us in. We'll enable these people, and then Accenture and all the major SIs will go and take your best people. So despite your best intentions that you will grow your own SAP workforce, it won't happen. But anyway, they didn't want to believe me. So at the end of the day, we bring out these people who are certified in not only Tricentis, but in the Tricentis Accelerator Packs, the business processes in an S4HANA environment. So we'd like to think that we're addressing that gap that I talked about earlier around what COVID's created in part, but also this has been coming for a long time, in my opinion. And the idea that we can't grow our own, we love to grow our own at Vertec. I'm directly addressing that, and I'm really passionate about it. Thank you, Mauricio. So just in summary, this is an infographic that we use with people who have expressed interest. Current student problems, you know, you all would know the courseware is expensive to go and do an SAP certification. We're not talking about saying that you're certified in SAP, but what we'll do is have you more than conversational in 30 business processes in finance. You'll understand them. You'll understand the test automation. You'll understand testing in an S4HANA environment. Static learning environments aren't always necessarily the best. So again, that S4 environment. Courseware with no real industry focus. We have every different customer we go to, well, but we're different. Everyone's different. They've all got SAP and they're all different, and that's awesome. We're really excited about that. Entry to the jobs marketplace. How do you get in? You know, people just don't know. A lot of people don't understand, and people don't even understand the opportunity and what COVID and what's going on in Australia right now around that opportunity. Why SAP? It's a market-leading software. I just noticed this today, over 80% market share globally. That's not correct. Someone's made a typo there, but it's a market leader. Modular focus on finance. So we'll probably do procurement next. But yeah, we're rapidly pushing out content. We've got our own Moodle instance as our learning management system. We've got connectivity to Tricentis, to our S/4HANA environment. We've got a constant demand for resources. So I'm sure you're all seeing the same things, all being senior professionals in your occupations, that yeah, we got a company came to us and we want 30 people a couple of weeks ago. We said, well, we can't help you. We can help you with some of them. Certainly here in Canberra, the bigger thing here is, as much as resources are critical, is the security clearances. And so we have the avenue now to get people security cleared without a job, which was a problem 3 years ago. It no longer is. So we've cleared that down now. So we're offering that to these folk as well. And it's the starting point, as testing often is, for whole of career options. So some people want to be an architect, they want to be other things. Testing is a great place to start. Why Tricentis? I think I've talked about most of these. Unrivaled thought leader, global testing partner for SAP. There's hardly any people in Australia. There might be 40 senior test analysts with this Tricentis experience, and of that, there's 15 in SAP, maybe not even that, who I would call genuine people who can communicate, meet with the right leaders, be able to talk to leaders in organisations. It's okay for people to sit in a corner and bang away, but when you've got to go and talk to concepts, some key concepts with senior stakeholders, a lot of people struggle. Easier entry via no code, low codes. So the old models, all you had to C#, whatever you had to do. Test automation market leader. What is Vertec training? It's SAP and test industry practitioners. So we have those people on board. We have focused industry-centric use cases. We learn in the real S4 environment. We utilise accelerator packs as a pathway to DevOps transformation. So I'm talking a lot to people about that. I'm also talking about this task and process mining, how we can better use that. Also, which I'm really keen to talk about, is to stop thinking about tools in a horizontal manner. We should be reusing capability across all areas where possible. And that task and process mining is a classic example. Where you can reuse that in other sectors where it can pitch it to business, but we can also use it in IT and similarly take out IT and use it for business to the benefit of everyone. And once we get into the real DevOps models where we are working with business, operations staff, development staff, that'll happen. It's going to happen. Before I'm 70, that'll happen. I'm very confident of that. And increase your likelihood of attaining a role just by having the training. So yeah, like I said, I'm really passionate about enabling people. Typically when I go into organisations now, I can tell you what's going to happen to a program of work within a week of being there, based on a review of their artefacts and what they're doing and the approach of leadership, and how they're approaching things. And yeah, I'm just really keen to help as many people as I can get into IT. So that's my passion, and I'll do it via a SAP test automation. Questions? Happy to come back and give you guys an actual demo of the tool at any stage whenever we're ready. Yeah, we've developed some little videos. We've got videos and stuff around examples of those accelerator packs and how they work as well. But yeah, anyone who wants to reach out to me, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, these would be really great, because today we see a lot of people talking on software quality management and automation and test automation, DevOps, and a lot of these buzzwords in SAP world today. But we have very few people that really understand and that really knows how to put that together. It's very hard to find people using, as Pedro showed us, some CI/CD pipelines connecting BAP servers to GitHub, and then you run your automation tests. And as you were just mentioning, all the tests automated via different tools that we can leverage on top of SAP, create test data for repeatable tests and things like that. So this helps a lot. This helps a lot because up to a couple of years ago, everything for SAP would be just tools provided by SAP itself. So we didn't have much options on do very flexible and powerful flows out of SAP. And now we do have the tool. So yeah, for sure, a demo would be great to see how that everything would fit together.
Yeah, okay, we can plan that. Are you guys monthly? Is that when you meet, monthly?
Yeah, we don't have any hard frequency to meet up. So from time to time, we have that. At least we try to have that a quarter, but due to all these restrictions, it's just hard to get people around these webinars and things like that. So people prefer to meet up in person and hit the pub afterwards. So.
Okay, look, I'm happy to talk to anyone that wants to reach out. I certainly want to become part of your community because, yeah, just both those presentations prior to mine, very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's good. And then we know, and I know myself and some other guys here in the call, we know a lot of people that use it to work with SAP as an entry level in their home countries, and they are in Australia. They would like to join these markets again, or even people that is just here studying whatever they are studying, but they would like to join SAP environment or SAP, yeah, environment in general, not just as a developer or a functional consultant doing FICO or whatever process they were working with. So this is a lot of opportunity that they could also explore. Yeah,
absolutely. Just get a feel for the environment.
Yeah,
it's really important. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the presentation. Ourives is still here with us, so thanks, Thiago. Thanks, Mark. Pedro has left already. But thank you, everybody that joined us today. Most people have left by this time because it's kind of late here in Australia. But yeah, thank you, guys. I think we can close up the call. As I said, I will share the slides decks and this video. I don't know when, but I'm going to do that, upload to YouTube and share with everybody. And we'll try to start the chats around the next one. So thank you very much. Hope to see you soon, and not just online, but to meet up again and have the after party.
Thiago, Simon Bernard said to say hello. He just joined Vertec beginning of July.
Simon is one of the great ones, man. Thank you. No, send my considerations to Simon, please. Yeah, he's great.
Well, we get talking to you, mate, about Signavio. Definitely want to have that chat with you.
Right.
Yeah. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thanks for organizing, Mauricio.
No
Cheers.
worries, no worries.
Bye,
Hey, mate.